todos a nuestro webinar.
Hello, good afternoon to everyone. Welcome to this webinar, this sort of virtual seminar organized by the Political Network for Values. Today, we are going to talk about an issue, a topic which is really important, really urgent, precisely because of its impact on its victims. Plenty of them, children, girls and boys that were amputated and they were object to different chemical treatments. Women and girls obliged to have male genitals, and they were forced to participate in different sports competitions in the opposite sex. And in order to talk about this really delicate topic, and in order to present you a vision of hope, let's say, we prepared this edition of Political Network for Values as politics against the gender politics, and we are going to share the experience of Hungary. Lőrinc Nacsa is going to be with us, who is a member of the Hungarian Parliament. Sharon Slater, who is president of the Family Watch International, as well our senior investigator. Sharon will be lead this dialogue. She's with us, and I will pass the word to her in this very moment. Thank you very much, Sharon.
Sharon, you have to turn on your mic.
Okay, do you hear me now? Yes,
Yes.
perfect. Okay, muchas gracias, Diego. It's an honor to be able to moderate this very important panel dealing with this issue of the transgender gender ideology agenda, which is affecting everyone across the world. We are especially honored today to have two distinguished panel members, some of the top experts in the area of model policies in protecting children, family, and women from this agenda, and just in the issues in general. So I'll introduce a little more formally later, but as you know, we have Jay Richards from the Heritage Foundation, and we have the Honorable Lőrinc Nacsa, from Member of Parliament from Hungary. So very distinguished guests, very knowledgeable guests. However, to frame this issue and our discussions today, we would like to just show briefly a short documentary that we have made. If you go to transgenderissues.org, you'll find a series of documentaries the Family Watch has produced. The one we're going to show you today is kind of an overview of all the issues, the serious issues related to this agenda. But we also have shorter and longer documentaries on just surgery, suicide, puberty blockers, stories, victim stories. And so you can go peruse that at transgenderissues.org at your leisure. So if we can have the technical people who have our documentary on transgender issues, the Transgender Agenda documentary ready, please let's go forward with that right now.
If you want breasts at a later point in your life, you can go and get them.
She said, if you want breasts later in life, you can just go and get them. Is that correct? Can you just get a new organ?
I thought, I'm never going to use those organs. I never planned on having children. You know, like, I might as well just get rid of them and I'm going to feel so much better.
I honestly don't think I was at an age where I was able to fully, truly understand.
Girls in the United States as young as 13 and 14 years old are having mastectomies of completely healthy breasts.
In terms of masculinizing top surgery, I think 12 is the youngest who's had surgery through our program.
Top surgery is for transmasculine patients who have significant dysphoria related to their breasts.
So these are the drains, and they hook onto your bandages. Today's the day that I get the bandages off. They are so tight. That is the worst thing about recovery, in my opinion, is how tight the bandages are. The drains on the side dig into your sides. I feel like I have like cuts.
The biggest contributor to the guilt for me is looking back and seeing that I got that surgery because I hated a part of myself so much.
I had top surgery. It was a month before I turned 17.
This is what my chest looked like only a few days after surgery. My nipple was not looking so great. She tore out all the dead tissue, which there was quite a bit of. You know, we had like napkins full of blood and pus. She massaged down my chest towards the opening and blood just flowed out. Here it is 3 days after all of that stuff happened. You can see my nipple looks like a cavern.
I had this intense grief. I was so angry at myself for having made this decision, and I was angry at the doctors for having let me.
A phalloplasty is about creating a penis. So we take tissue either from the forearm or from the leg, or sometimes both, and transplant it down to the groin area to create a phallus.
Well, as you can see here, my right thigh was the donor site, and this scar on my left leg is from the skin graft covering the donor site.
After my phalloplasty surgery, I've been dealing with some complications with urinating. I wasn't able to urinate at all. It was really scary. It was extremely painful.
When we do a orchiectomy, we make a cut right there and right there, and then physically remove the testicles.
I was really surprised to be approved for orchiectomy. When I woke up in the morning, I noticed very sharp pain at the bottom of my incision site. Immediately after surgery, I was in excruciating pain.
What is gender-affirming vaginoplasty? It is a trans-feminizing male-to-female procedure using the natal male genitalia to create a vagina. Infertility is a result of the surgery itself.
The worst thing that can happen after this surgery is what we call a fistula. If a hole forms in the rectum, oftentimes the stool will, instead of going out the way it should, out the rectum, it will instead leak out the new vagina. Many times we have to do what's called a diverting colostomy. So what that means is the patient has to wear a temporary bag on their belly where they have bowel movements. Patients need to be very aware of it before signing up for the surgery, that this is indeed a possibility.
I went through 2 surgeries to change my genitalia. I had excessive bleeding, and coming out of surgery, I was bleeding, and it was actually inside the new vagina pocket that was just created. They were packing in gauze and gauze and gauze, and actually had to put sandbags on my abdomen to try to create the pressure to stop the bleeding, and then I had to have blood transfusion, a lot of plasma.
The hard part isn't over after the surgery day. It's really just beginning.
What we know is that even hormonally and surgically treated trans identities exhibit high levels of suicide ideation. Individuals with gender dysphoria are well known to commit suicide at elevated rates. But this is true both before and after social transition, and before and after gender-conforming surgery.
People are okay for about 10 years after these surgeries, but then after that, then these great regrets and even death from suicide begins to occur.
I made a really dangerous choice that I have to live with. I have to live with this for the rest of my life, and it terrifies me.
So I apologize. I should have given you a warning of how graphic this video was going to be. I thought actually we were going to be playing the one that gives more of an overview of all the issues with surgery just being one part. But I'm actually glad that this one was shown, because I don't think the world understands how horrific this agenda is. Talking about informed consent, first of all, we know when we're talking about children that they can't consent to this. They can have no conception what it means to end up infertile for life. Once these children get on this conveyor belts of puberty blockers, the studies show that nearly 100% are going on to the cross-sex hormones, and then these surgeries, they're losing their sexual functioning, their ability to feel sexual pleasure, and their fertility. That is one of the largest attacks on the family, the institution of the family, which brings forth children in our society that we could possibly imagine. And just to frame a few things before we have our guests, you know, this agenda is coming from the international, national, state, local, and even at the family level. Family Watch, as many of you know, has consultative status at the United Nations. And we watch how, as day in and day out, either deceptively or straight out, provisions are being put forward to protect and advance the transgender agenda. Namely, you are likely aware that the UN has appointed a special expert on non-discrimination and prevention of violence based on sexual orientation and gender identity. And this UN expert, that's supposed to be the top expert in the world, is creating reports demanding that children have a right to such surgeries and that this be mandated and taught in the schools. You may also be aware that Family Watch International is at the forefront of exposing something called comprehensive sexuality education. And we have identified 15 harmful elements that is being pushed through that education across the globe. And one of those harmful elements is, of course, the promotion of gender ideology, the false concept that a child can become something other than their biological sex. We have UNICEF promoting this agenda, UNAIDS, UN Women. This is one of the greatest assaults on women, as we know, as there are battles, policy battles across the globe over protecting women's spaces, such as bathrooms and showers and locker rooms, protecting them in sports, being able to have their own different competitions without men overriding and taking their scholarships. Men are even winning women's beauty contests. The destruction in the family, as this is pushed as marriage based on a man and a woman, is the fundamental unit of society as the formation of the family. So we have policy battles, we have medical battles all across the globe, all across the US where I live. This is a problem. In the state that I'm living in, there's policy battles. And just to frame the gravity of this situation, with that, I'll introduce our first guest. We are very, very grateful and honored to have the Honorable Lorin Knacska, from a member of Parliament in Hungary. He has been the forerunner and the impetus behind the all-important law that was passed in Hungary to prevent children from being sexualized, and the mental molestation with this transgender agenda and gender ideology is now prohibited in Hungary. And we'll be excited to learn about that model legislation. And then just to read a little bit of his bio. He is a member of Parliament in the National Assembly of Hungary. He's a member of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. He's the vice president of the EPP groups in the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. And he has a bachelor's in international studies from Pansmany Peter Catholic University. So we'll hand over 10 minutes for him to present. Then I'll introduce our next guest, then he'll present for 10 minutes. And then we will have a chance for a Q&A colloquium hearing from the other members of Parliament and government officials who are participating today. So with no further ado, Honorable Lornik Nakska, please.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Sharon. Good evening here in Budapest. Some of you have mornings and afternoons, but we have already passed the sunset here in Budapest. So welcome everybody. Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for being here, and thank you for the opportunity that we can speak about this important topic. As you all know, from 2010, when the Christian Democratic, conservative, patriotic government came into power, we are constantly focusing as our #1 priority the demographic challenges and the good and wide family policy and protecting the children's right, and most importantly, protecting the parents' right. For the past 10 years, the Hungarian government has been working on strengthening families, raising children, and enabling young couples to realize their family goals. This approach, the Hungarian model, has produced real results. We have an increasing fertility rate, we have an increasing number of marriages, a decrease in the number of divorces, and the number of abortions dropped by 38% in the last 10 years. But today's topic, the adoption of the Child Protection Package. We adopted this law in June 2021, so 1.5 years ago. And this adoption of this law has triggered strong international response, often claiming discrimination and violations of EU fundamental values. You know, we are always accused of violating the EU fundamental values, the so-called common values that we all share, but nobody ever said what are these values. But we think that the faith, the family, the work, the security, the human dignity, and the sanctity of family is our base values. And we would like to work in the future as well. We would like to work based on these values. We had such statements reflect lack of knowledge, misunderstanding, and in some cases, deliberate misinformation throughout the Western liberal media. It must be emphasized that in spite of all allegations, the legislation does not provide for a general ban on the content concerned. In our view, the legislation does not result in the exclusion of any group of people or discrimination thereof. The law is only about the education of Hungarian children and the protection of minors. This legislation does not apply to adult citizens. It does not interfere in the life of adults in any way. It does not impair the rights of sexual minorities in any way. Hungary guarantees the rights of religious, ethnic, sexual, and any other minorities. The Hungarian constitution, the Hungarian basic law, strictly prohibits, and our laws strictly sanction exclusionary and discriminatory practices affecting minorities. The level of protection of children in Hungary is determined by the basic law, the constitution, and it is in line with the Charter of the Fundamental Rights. For example, it's a quote, "Parents have the right to choose the education to be given to their children." Hungary ensures that only the parent can decide on the education of his or her own child, that no one can be forced to tolerate without his or her consent, that his or her child receives sexual education or faces harmful content that is inappropriate for the child's age. For example, my wife and I, we are raising three children. Two of them are going to school, elementary school, and what we see regarding sexual education, that now in Hungary, with only the parents' consent, can have any sexual education in the schools. And my wife and I, we don't want to others, some NGOs, some liberal mainstream NGOs, to educate our children regarding the sexual education. So this law is based on the parents' right. because the protection of minors is a core responsibility of the European Union member states as well. EU membership in no way affects the right of Hungary to take decisions relating to the protection of children and the manner and extent of the protection deemed necessary in accordance with our national identity. The subject matter falls exclusively in national competence. EU law allows the member states to lay down stricter rules for the protection of minors, because we consider this law as a law for protection of the rights of the minors and protection of the education of minors, an option that the legislator exercises. In accordance with EU law, European Union law, the Hungarian legal system has already restricted before this law the availability of programs that may adversely affect the physical, mental, or moral development of minors. Really important that we put into the moral word as well. In this respect, the legislation has not introduced significant changes, but on 3rd April 2022, this year, 9 months ago or 8 months ago, the Hungarian citizens were called to participate at a referendum on questions related to the protection of children. The results of the referendum left no doubt about how Hungarian citizens view these issues. This question about protection of the parents' rights and about transgender ideologies in the schools and transgender propaganda in the schools, the Hungarian citizens rejected it by 94% or 96%. It was the biggest one direction referendum since the end of the communist era. So it was bigger support than the EU accession or the NATO accession. I would like to say a few words about the positive changes that the law contained that we passed 1.5 years ago. And this is a quote from the law. It shall be forbidden to make accessible to persons who have not attained the age of 18 years advertisement that depicts sexuality in a gracious manner or that propagates or portrays divergence from self-identity corresponding to sex at birth, sex change, or homosexuality. Another quote from the law: making available data of persons who have committed criminal offenses against the freedom of sexual life and sexual morality against children. And another quote: programs shall be classified into category 5 if they are capable of exerting negative influence on the physical, mental, or moral development of minors. So it should be allowed only above 18 years old. These programs shall be rated as follows: not appropriate for audiences under the age of 18. If they contain the central element of violence, propagation of portrayal of divergence from self-identity corresponding to sex at birth, sex change, or homosexuality, or direct, naturalistic depiction of sexuality. Another quote: the state shall protect the institution of family and marriage, also due to their dignity and value in and of themselves, with particular regard to the relationship between parents and children, in which the mother is a woman and the father is a man. The protection of organized family relationship and the implementation of the right of children to a self-identity corresponding to their sex at birth shall play a key role in preserving their physical, mental, and moral health. It shall be forbidden to make accessible to persons who have not attained the age of 18 years content that is pornographic, that depicts sexuality, or it directs the sex change or homosexuality. So as you see from these quotes, we were quite strict on this matter, but it only applies for minors, children, students under 18 years old, because we thought that the right of the parents is above the right of some kind of NGOs and sex educators who are willing to be at schools without the consent of the parents. So we were under really heavy attacks from the leftist liberal media from throughout the Western society, the European Union, and North America as well. because they said that this law is homophobic. They said that it's anti-children. They said it's anti, I don't know, equality. But we think that in schools and in the education system, it really matters that what you give to your children, what you give to your students, based on, we think that the education should be based on values. Values as family, values as faith, values as work, values as security, values as honesty, human dignity, and so on. And we think that without these values, we cannot raise children as honest citizens of the Republic of Hungary. And we thought that this law could help protect our children from this propaganda coming from different countries and from different NGOs, even here in Hungary. So they were really angry, let's be honest, these NGOs, but we thought that this law could prevent that without any consent of the parents, because we experienced, even in Hungary, but Western countries so far, that without any consent of the parents, some NGOs, some propaganda, transgender propaganda came into different schools and making lectures and making seminars about the transgenderism, about sexuality, and the parents didn't even know about that. So that's why we thought that we should have a law. We should protect the parents' rights first. We should protect the moral development, the physical and spiritual and moral development of the children. And of course, Hungary is a free country. So after 18, you can do whatever you want. But please leave alone our children. Thank you very much. Sorry, just one sentence. If anybody needs this law legally sentenced in an English translation, please let me know. Give me a message, and I can send to you via email. You can send me a message through Lola or Ivan Rodrigo Cortez or anybody. They know my email address. I can send you the law in English.
Thank you. I think that there's going to be a great demand for that, and that we'll have Lola just send it out to everybody who's registered for this webinar. So I've seen all the attacks on Hungary, which are totally unfounded. As you mentioned, you know, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights says that parents have the prior right to decide the education of their children. And there's multiple binding UN treaties that call for the protection of the rights of parents so that they can protect their children exactly from these kinds of things. You rightly brought forward the concept of this is the destruction of the family, the moral fabric of a nation. If you confuse a child about their gender, it's going to be very difficult for them to establish a stable marriage and go on and establish a stable family, which you rightly noted is the fundamental unit of our societies. So the misconstruing and misrepresentation of this law is just so disappointing and unfortunate, because this is model legislation that we all need to put into our policies wherever possible. So we applaud Hungary, we applaud you. Thank you for being the impetus behind this, and we will now go on to the next speaker. I wish we had more time to hear about it, and maybe people can get in touch with you to learn and get ideas and strategies for how you were able to accomplish that in Hungary. So our next distinguished speaker is J.W. Richards. He's the director of the DeVos Center for Life, Religion, and Family. He's the William E. Simon Senior Research Fellow in Religious Liberty and Civil Society at the Heritage Foundation. And the Heritage Foundation has been taking a leading role in organizing experts all around the world and in policy, in medicine, in mental health, to help protect children and the family and laws. with regard to this transgender, against this transgender agenda. He's also the former director of the Center of Wealth, Poverty, and Morality at the Discovery Institute. He has a PhD in philosophy and theology from Princeton Theological Seminary, a master's degree in philosophical theology from Calvin Theological Seminary, and a bachelor's in political science and religion from Southwestern University. So we are honored to have you, Jay, and if you would take the floor, please.
Thanks so much, Sharon, and thanks so much to all of our friends at the Political Network for Values. I'm going to share my screen, and I want to speak just very briefly about exactly one topic, and that is to try to explain to you exactly what gender ideology is. I was at a dinner, I'm in a hotel room, I'm sorry, in New York City today because I was at a dinner last night with a bunch of Catholic philanthropists who asked me what I was doing. I said, oh, well, I'm fighting gender ideology. These are all very well-informed Catholics, and uniformly they said, now, what is that exactly? And so we are at this very strange stage culturally in which an ideology has worked its way into our institutions, into our media, into our social media, into our educational institutions, and yet we're not prepared to deal with it, in part because we don't really understand what it is. And the reason we tend not to understand what it is that it is so strange that when people hear about it, they tend to think, okay, that's either an exaggeration or I must be misunderstanding it. So I'm a philosopher by trade, and so I really want to just boil this down for you, and I hope I can persuade you that this really is as diabolical and insane as it seems to be. This is the way to sort of think of the question. What ideology would be required for us to be able to teach children that they can be born in the wrong body, and that a way to cure them if they think they're born in the wrong body is not to help them adjust to the body they actually have, but to transform their body with scalpel and drugs to conform to this thing called a gender identity. You saw in the video that Sharon showed, in fact, I had to turn my eyes away from that, but that is the brutal reality of what is happening. And it's crucial to understand that this is being targeted very specifically at young children, and for a reason. Children, by the time they're 5 or 6, under normal development, will come to believe that human beings come in 2 forms, male and female. We are mammals, we are sexual binaries, there are exactly 2 reproductive gametes, there's not a 3rd one, and so they're not multiple sexes. And somehow that obvious truth has to be uprooted, and the best way to do that is to indoctrinate young children. That is why we see a massive, massive increase around the developed world in children presenting to gender clinics with symptoms of so-called gender dysphoria. In other words, a discomfort with their sexed bodies. Let me give you one example. In the United Kingdom, from 2009 until 2019, there was an increase in the number of children being referred to the single pediatric gender clinic of 4,400%. So in other words, 44 times more kids showing symptoms of gender dysphoria in the United Kingdom in a single 10-year period. This is a massive, massive social contagion that could only have happened if there was a concerted campaign to teach children that. So what is gender ideology? I think we can boil it down to this simple point. Gender ideology takes the concept of sex as a description of biological reality, of human nature, male and female, these 2 fundamental but complementary biological forms, and it wants to displace that and deconstruct it and replace it with a different concept called gender identity in English, which superficially sounds like a synonym for sex, but is actually a replacement concept. In other words, it means something entirely different than biological sex. And in fact, according to gender ideology, biological sex is or gender identity is independent of the body. So the body has no meaning with respect to your gender identity. And I think I can prove this to you with 2 images used around the country in the United States, unfortunately, without anyone quite realizing it. Children are now shown images like this in order to teach them Essentially, it's a catechism of gender ideology. And so you take a small child and teach them, okay, rather than thinking of people as boys and girls, think of people as having different aspects of themselves. And four in particular, there's their identity, which is what they identify with. And this is called the genderbread person, is this particular diagram. And so the identity in the genderbread person, it's identified with your brains or what you think. Then there's your attraction or orientation, who you're sexually or romantically attracted to. There's your expression, which is just how you present yourself, how you dress, how you speak. And then in this early version of the genderbread person, there's a fourth category, sex. And if you'll notice on the diagram over on the right side of the image, it has that category biological sex. And now many people think this is what gender ideology claims, that you can have a gender identity independent of your biological sex. That's not actually correct. And it's not, because it's not correct, the committed gender ideologues criticized this diagram, the genderbread person. Why? Because it retained the idea of biological sex. It also retained the idea of identity as attached to a brain, to a biological object. And so this had to go. This version of the genderbread person was replaced. And in many places, it was replaced by a completely different diagram called the gender unicorn. All right, so I want you, all you need to notice, we could spend an hour analyzing these images. Nothing is accidental here. What I want you to notice is simply the change. What did the gender unicorn solve for gender ideologues that the genderbread person did not? Well, first, notice the genderbread person looks like a man, and so that's a problem. Should not look like a man. The genderbread person's identity is attached to a brain, and it has this idea of biological sex connected, in this case, to the genitalia. Now look at the gender unicorn. It's androgynous. We don't know if this is a boy or a girl. It's sort of both or neither. Notice that its gender identity, there is no longer a brain. There's just a thought bubble, just an abstract, immaterial thought, in this case of a rainbow, which is itself an ethereal object. That's crucial. That's absolutely crucial to the philosophy, so that it's now almost entirely divorced from biology. Then you have the gender expression, you have physical and emotional attraction, and then here's what I want you to notice. If you forget everything else I say, remember this. We no longer have biological sex, we have sex assigned at birth. And so what gender ideology does is it displaces this perennial idea of human beings, at least certainly in the Judeo-Christian tradition, in which we are a unity of spirit and matter. We are body and soul, body and form. We are unities of our body. So we can't have the wrong body because that's a part of our identity. And so our sex is something we discover. It's something that we simply are given, that we find. It's not something we identify with. It's not something we decide. Under gender ideology, the most that sex can be is an assignment. So sex assigned at birth means that even what you might think of as biological sex is really a social construct. It's really just the product of a social construction in which doctors and nurses have come to identify certain external genitalia with this idea of sex, but it's not a real thing. It doesn't tell you about the person. The thing that's real about the person in gender ideology is a pure, immaterial psychological self called gender identity that is independent of the body, that is independent of sex. And so it is so radical that if you ask for a definition of gender identity, it will not make reference to biology. It will not make reference to sex. It will say, well, gender identity is your internal subjective sense of gender. Now, philosophers would hate that definition because we need to know what gender identity is. You don't want to use the same word, gender, in the definition of the thing you're trying to define. But that's actually a virtue for gender ideologues because it completely detaches gender identity from the body. And so therefore, it's a perfectly proper and in fact standard protocol, a standard form of medical treatment to fix gender dysphoria. So-called in the United States, it's called gender affirming care. What that means is asking someone what their perceived gender identity is. And if it's not in conformity with their body, then the proper treatment is to absolutely transform the body. And incidentally, we're not just talking about boys identifying as girls and girls identifying as boys. The options are absolutely limitless. And so you have dual sex, in which people are having surgeries in which they try to create facsimiles of both sexual organs, which of course don't work. You have nullification surgeries in which people simply remove their genitalia altogether so that they're smooth like a eunuch. The sky is the limit, and this is where we're going. And this is precisely the ideology that in most countries and in most places has overtaken the schools and social media. It's the ideology that a few brave countries like Hungary are trying to push back on. And that's, unfortunately, that's my depressing message to you. I will leave in a note of hope, though, is this is so radical that I am convinced, and many of us are convinced, that it will destroy itself if we resist it, and it will end with massive legal cases against the ideologues who push this. Our goal here, that those of us that are working on this, is to try to stop it legally and in a policy way before we have hundreds of thousands of sterilized children. Thank you very much.
Wow, thank you. I think a fundamental understanding of how crazy this agenda is. We've identified a list from Tumblr of 112 genders, if you can imagine. And I think, Dr. Richards, that was really important for understanding. But I just think it's kind of ironic that you are in New York. New York, you can be fined up to $250,000 for misgendering a person. We're talking about not using what they call their preferred pronouns. So this is not only a medical and mental, travesty on children and any of those who go through this process. It's also a religious freedom issue where people are being compelled in speech as far as pronouns, and jobs are being lost by teachers who won't recognize a false identity of a child. And, there are many serious things. You also brought to light the increase of people identifying, especially children, the social contagion that we know is happening, the 44 times you said increase in these children identifying. And I think it's important to note, when we take a global look at this, that we actually have 3 countries that are backing off, that were proponents of pushing children and adults down this conveyor belt. We have Sweden, Finland, and the UK are re-examining this gender affirmative approach, saying that you must affirm the child by, transitioning them socially, by calling them different genders and putting them on the medical conveyor belt. But they're seeing the damage. We have multiple detransitioners who are speaking out at younger and younger age groups. In fact, we have many that are willing to testify. For those of you who are members of Parliament, please get in contact with Jay or with us if you ever need that, because this is about laws and policies. That's why we've gathered politicians and members of Parliament here, is to grapple with how we can protect the children in the laws and policies. And I just want to make one more note, since you brought up the genderbread person. Right after President Trump got into office, I did a tour of the USAID building, the federal building in Washington, D.C. That's all the aid that's coming to across the developing countries. And the genderbread person was like, almost like the rainbow flag is to the homosexual movement. The genderbread person was like a flag, and was outside many of the cubicles of these desks, the cubicles that all the people working for USAID. And we know that the US, Canada, the EU is exporting this ideology as if it were fact, and mentally molesting children across the globe, millions, if not billions of dollars, supported by UN agencies, supported by Planned Parenthood that has 65,000 service points in 160 countries, pushing this. And the #1 tool that they are using is comprehensive sexuality education, trying to get this mental molestation to all the children. So, there's so much we could talk about, the suicide, false claims, that they're using to get these laws passed. Family Watch has a policy brief on that where you can show that it actually can increase the suicide rates by affirming them. But I want to get on to the questions. And we've invited the chair of the Political Network for Values board, Rodrigo Ivan Cortez, who has been a valiant advocate in protecting children and in laws and policies with regard to gender ideology, who will help us moderate this session, because I believe, Rodrigo, you have a handle on who we have on the line as far as parliamentarians. And so I'll hand the floor to you for a little bit to identify who we have, and then we'll open it up for questions and discussion. Go ahead, Rodrigo.
Wonderful, Sharon, thank you very much. The video was so impressive, and the participation of our both participants were excellent. So let me tell you that we have 30 countries present. I'm gonna say it in Spanish. Tenemos.
So we have 30 countries represented. People from Argentina, Bolivia, Brazil, Cameroon, Chile, Colombia, Congo, Ecuador, Spain, Ethiopia, France, Hungary, Jamaica, Kenya, Mexico, Nicaragua, Nigeria, Panama, Peru, the Dominican Republic, Rwanda, South Africa, Sudan, Switzerland, Tanzania, Uganda, United States, and Venezuela. And so we have representatives, popular representatives, legislators from 30 countries, and we also have several members, quite well-known ones, in the ranks of Political Network for Values, both in Spain. So Javier Puente, Beresa Mendes, Maria de Rosario from Colombia, people from Argentina. Diego Hermansky from Brazil. And so we have several legislators and politicians, and I would love to hand the floor to the people who would like to intervene and who would like to take the floor, who would like to participate. And I would love to start with Joaquín Arias from Spain. With the situation that we talked about, the situation in Spain last time. So Georgina, we can start with you, if you feel like that. Thank you very much, Rodrigo. Thank you, and thank you, Lola, also for the participation at this colloquium. The truth is that in Spain, we are in a traumatic situation. The day that the Trans Act was approved by the Congress, where it was debated, the Act of Annual Welfare and the Abortion Act were also discussed, the same thing, the same morning, the three things. So we see some bastality in terms of ideological impact, and indeed, I am very much worried because of the children, because I believe that one of the speakers said that they are indeed endangered, just as the family is endangered. And I believe we have a huge challenge ahead of us. In the first presentation, in Sharon's presentation, is the first time that I see what a trans surgery implies. But there are so many people who have no idea what this means in the life of all these children. We have the challenge to communicate this in a way that this should affect our societies. I'm talking on behalf of the Spanish society. And at the same time, I always believe that the same time that we show the horror, we also have the responsibility, just like Hungary, to show the beauty, what the family means. That all these politics, and the truth being said, in Spain, we are looking at Hungary, not from Spain, but actually from Vox Party. It would be nice if the whole Spain would take Hungary and Poland as role models. But currently, the situation in Spain is terrible. It's very bad, and even yesterday, I was at home. The children were watching football, soccer, as you know, and then the Ministry of Social Rights had an announcement which announced, with the excuse of protecting childhood, because an act has been approved in terms of the protection of children, only the Vox Party was against. And in this framework, some terrible fathers and mothers were presented, and the ministry showed that there might be some parents who can be terrible. This was the only attack. And what I tweeted this today, because it is frightening how shameful this attack is and how we react to this, and or how we do not react to it. And you remarked very well that Sweden and the United Kingdom are taking a step back because they can see all the devastating consequences for the children, for the childhood, which these transgender surgeries imply and mean, because this has gone beyond every threshold. So from my point of view, so Lőrinc from Hungary also explained, Hungary's message is that we protect children and the family. The first and primary educators of the children are the parents. Whenever have we legislative initiatives in Spain, we speak about the children's rights, and the parents are never mentioned, the family is never mentioned, and this is common sense actually. So who is the best person to guarantee the safety of children? It is common sense. It is the parents. And it is foreseen usually by the constitutions of European countries. And we need to go on fighting. And I participated in this network in the past months. I'm learning a lot. Thank you very much to the speakers, and hopefully we can achieve a lot. Thank you very much. Thank you, Georgina. And before handing the floor to Javier Puente, I would love to mention that there's a trans agenda, a terrible international war is being waged. So it is not only in one place, but sadly, this is coming from the United Nations, whose manifold plans. The 2023 agenda also involves such plans. And to give a very concrete example, I dared to criticize in the Mexican parliament a trans person, who disguises himself or herself to be a bishop in order to present an initiative and it's a level of attack against churches and due to all this language. So what I'm saying and what I requested in my parliamentary speech is that this that nobody can be criticized if somebody is trans. Not even a hashtag for the rejection of transgender policies can be created. So such concepts, it's the same concepts that are being used in Spain as in Argentina, in the African countries. So this is very serious. And let's hand over the floor to Javi, and after that to Isabel Salazar. So please, Javi, the floor is yours. Hello, good afternoon, and thank you very much, Rodrigo. It's a pleasure being here with all of you, and I will be brief because lots of us are still here, and everything that is being debated is very interesting. So, Georgina, hello, greetings. You already commented a little bit on the situation in Spain. It is true that this is a global phenomenon. It's very great to see initiatives like Hungary's, and I'm very certain that common sense has to win, has to be victorious, has to prevail. This is an attack against the family, against the children, and well said, Rodrigo, it's not only against religious freedom, but also against the freedom of expression. We need to recover rights, which we already had. We need to recover the rights that we gained in the 19th century. It sounds like a joke, but indeed we need to recover such rights. In the past years, so indeed the Animal Welfare Act, which is there, the Abortion Act and the Family Act, which pretends 16 kinds of new families. So this again, one more step towards the destruction of the family, which has been commented upon, and the attack against children. And on top of all this, and together with this, as the second speaker also said, all the attacks are perfectly organized and from all sides, and the society has no idea when celebrating gender ideology what this is, what is the woke movement. And as for the Trans Act, it's actually an ensemble, a unit of 18 acts, which is an attack against the woman. We spoke about sports. We spoke that this is basically peaking. And so women just need to sign a man who considers himself to be a woman, and they have already the match won. And if somebody is not hired just trans, then you can be sued for being transphobic or anything of the kind. And you need to prove that it's not, that you are not that. Although the other side should try to prove that you are indeed transphobic. So this is indeed serious, and this can lead to reports, to denunciations. It is very hard to get rid of this, and you can also be fined for such reasons. So this is the situation in Spain that Georgina also mentioned. Hope is also there. I would love to encourage everybody. We are indeed fighting against this gender ideology, and I'm absolutely positive that we will achieve a lot more results. A big hug to you, and we keep on battling. Thank you, Javi. We mentioned that Angela Gandra already needed to leave, but she greets us from Brazil, and now Isabel from Ecuador. Isabel, the floor is yours.
So I'm working here in Ecuador. I'm working with feminists. It's a pleasure to us hearing all these topics, because it is really great to see wonderful families here in Latin America, simple, normal people. They have certain difficulties as far as the safety is concerned. Their family economics are concerned, and we are really sad that they are attacked by this agenda. Talking about public policies, I believe that the biggest challenge we face is not to confront a thesis with another thesis, but we need to give proofs. We need to demonstrate that we are right, that the parents has a really important social function. We need to demonstrate it, and we need to implement social policies based on investigations. I believe if we as politicians could reach a sort of discussion like this, it would help us to have a really great strategy, not just saying that we believe that the respect of the family is important, but demonstrating with evidences. We have right, that's undoubtedly, and it is really important to reinforce these really important comments. It is important that we politicians at international level, we need to help to give evidences. We started to work on a children protection law proposed in Ecuador, and I believe it's really important to work together on these topics. Thank you, Isabel. Before giving the word to Elsa, there is a comment of an observation of Hannah from Brazil. She mentioned that the most terrific thing is that NGOs and politicians are doing gender politics, disseminating gender politics within the schools to the most vulnerable, that are the children. So I believe that's also true. Elsa, I guess I give you the word to you.
Hello and greetings. It's great to be with you. It's great to be able to learn from you, and all this dialogue where we are able to share whatever we have done in our respective countries. And we believe that in Mexico there are not many good things to talk about, because unfortunately, as you also know, I had the honor to represent my state as an MP, and we have a very clear agenda in favor of the fundamental freedom, the family, the children. And 85% of our initiatives were also approved, also the perspective of the family in my state in terms of public policies. But unfortunately, there was no continuation to that. We have no representatives of a clear agenda who we could count with, who could be our allies. Quite on the contrary, what we have is a real attack that happens against us. We are discussing an act or more than 50 initiatives actually, which have been joined together under the umbrella of sustainable gender development. And since 2019, this is ongoing, and this has been advancing, has been making headway. And this is going to be approved in a short period of time, where they wish to legalize the sex change in their most delicate of ages under the umbrella of sexual rights, and also a comprehensive sexual education is taught. Hormonization, mutilation of the kids, of course, irreversible changes, and nobody will be responsible for this very serious situation, for this border that they will cross. So this ideology is killing lives, taking lives, is destroying families, and no politician will be responsible for the damage caused. because and families will need to endure all this. So this is a very serious situation in Mexico, just like in other countries. And in Mexico, we need to cast our eyes to examine all this in order to bring these initiatives. And in terms of civil society, we need to motivate them, like with the Frente Nacional por la Familia, with Rodrigo Ivan as a leader, because evidently all these, what these initiatives bring along is that behind these terms is pederasty, and this is actually the right term. And on a daily basis, our children are endangered. Some are not let to be born. Those who are born are being indoctrinated, and they are being kidnapped ideologically so that they can be manipulated in a period where they are unable to decide, and they want to distance ourselves, the parents. And I believe that Hungary, what they are doing is a very good thing, just like the DeSantis governor of Florida or the Texas governor, where they had politics very much according to our lines in favor of the family, of the children. They believe that gender ideology is pornography, and they consider the parents as the primary educators, the protectors, the only ones who should be able to take decisions instead of their children. And we should also bring this to the public. Our voice needs to be heard, and first of all, we need to be protected. Because the freedoms of expression are only to those who promote this agenda. We are being censored, as Rodrigo also said, and I was also censored, and I underwent basically criminal court due to the censorship that I was exposed to. But luckily, we have alliances, and we can make headway, we can advance, we can progress, we can have a clear and firm voice in each and every space, and we can indeed reveal the intentions of these traitors, of these people who are very much against our children. So thank you very much, and thank you very much for all the initiatives. Please forward all these presentations to me via Rodrigo, and I'm also at your disposal should you need anything. Thank you very much, Elsa. And thank you for speaking up, for raising your voice, for speaking in front of Parliament, in front of court, for due to this attempt against the children, against the family. Rodrigo, may I say something? Here, the important thing is,
because we have so many esteemed legislators who can take this message that we're portraying today and actually work on policy issues. I think it's important for you to understand there is a group of mental and medical health professionals, detransitioners, and experts from across the world, but mostly in the United States, that are willing to testify in any kind of hearings, legislative hearings in your countries. So if you ever need testimonies, please contact us at Family Watch, and we'll connect you to that group so that you have the testimonies that can help support these important laws that you're attempting to pass in the order of what Hungary has done. Because I think we need to talk about, you know, we need multiple legislation. We need parental rights protections. We need protections or bans against surgery and the hormones and all of these things. We need protections for religious freedom and First, Amendment in the US, but speech rights. We need protection from children from this ideology in the schools. There's just a lot of levels of different kinds of legislation that needs to be passed. And not only at the national level or the state level, but at the international level. If we don't stop, there's something called customary international law, where even if your states are not agreeing to these things, if at the United Nations, as this expert is appointed and all of these different policies are being passed for the protection of sexual orientation and gender identity, if there is not persistent objection from your states or many states, you can actually be bound by all of this so-called jurisprudence that the UN is trying to create to push gender ideology. They're having UN treaty body committees that are reinterpreting the treaties. I'll give you one example. The International Covenant on Economic and Social Cultural Rights has a non-discrimination clause. And it says, basically, you can't discriminate based on, race and all these different lists that you normally see in these clauses. But at the end, it says, or other status. You can't discriminate based on or other status. And the UN committee monitoring that treaty issued a comment now saying that or other status includes protection for sexual orientation and gender identity. You have or other status also in the UN Development Sustainable Goals, the 2030 Agenda. It's, that term is getting in everywhere. You have all of these initiatives across the world to prevent gender-based violence. And when we have terms and policies and resolutions being passed at the UN using the term gender instead of sex-based violence or violence against women and girls, we have serious problems because these terms with gender are getting into policies and then reinterpreted in these ways. So as policymakers, we would warn you, and we can even send you our chart of gender terms, that any term, gender transformative, gender-based, gender, we have a list of, I think, 100 gender terms. These need to be removed and rejected when policies are being made. So instead of gender-based violence, it should be violence against women and girls and so forth. So instead of gender, discrimination, it should be discrimination based on sex. So these are policy things that need to be, as they're trying to mainstream the gender ideology and gender agenda through international, national, state policies, we need to mainstream the family and the family perspective and remove those terms. So I'm sorry to take that time, but I thought it was really important to talk about the policies in specific, a little bit more specifically.
Thank you very much, Sharon. This is very helpful because in several countries, the representatives don't have a clear idea of what these concepts mean. And when the discussion arrives, there is very few people that are willing to speak. So if you have this contact with these people that are willing to go on and give his testimony, that will be very, very helpful, because we have to take this kind of testimony in order to convince the legislators what is really happening with this kind of concepts and agenda. Thank you very much, Sharon. Quisiera también mencionar que tenemos.
I would like to mention also that Michelle Povanca from Slovenia, Katengo, Marcelo Zwinden, Maximiliano Herman Dyer, Felipe Martinez, Joyce Kameny, Elisabetta Fernandez, Schubert Lourdes Mendes, Monasterio, so many other persons I would like to salute. There is a question that was raised. I don't know who of you would like to answer from the panelists. Some of the panelists are still with us. So the question is, what do you think, which is the best way in which we could alert our politicians from the civil society, from the foundations, to invite them to defend our children against these permanent attacks that they are suffering from. I don't know who of you would like to answer this question from the here present. Maximiliano, the word is yours. Good afternoon to all of you. Well, I'm starting to speak. I would say that one of the way, maybe it's not the best, but it's a really efficient way, is that the citizens they have to show that they are really interested in these topics, not only during the campaign time, but also after, during the legislation. So the politician needs to know that there is the society. The society is vigilant what they are doing after the elections, and they are representing the society. In 2018, in Argentina, we debated a law about the legalization of the abortion, and the society as such got into contact with both the Senate and the Congress. There were developed several different strategies, but actually the citizens were who decided to protect, to defend this topic that they considered really important. And that's why actually this law in that moment was not adopted. Later on in 2020, different proposals were presented to the parliament. But it is really important, I would like to highlight the importance that the citizens should be really interested in this topic. So this would be a suggestion to Jacopo. And well, thank you very much for the participation, and thank you very much for having me invited. Thank you very much, Maximiliano. Well, if there are no more questions or interventions, I think we should slowly close.
Rodrigo, before we do that, can I just draw your attention to the fact that we just put a link into the chat, which is to the chart of gender terms, which actually when the Trump administration got into office, they started using this chart of terms internally to change all their policies, to try to get rid of all the gender ideology. So it kind of gives you ideas. The link, I think, is in the chat now, is it? I think, yeah, my assistant just put it there. And then I would also have her type transgenderissues.org in there so that you can get to the website with all the videos on all the different topics, including the one that we just showed you on surgery. I would hope that you would utilize that, share those videos freely. If you need any of them subtitled in the language of your country, contact us and we'll subtitle them. The main video is, I believe, subtitled in Hungarian. And then just another resource that I think we want to add, if you type in familywatch.org, if you sign up for our newsletter, as we produce more videos and more tools, you will receive that for free. So you can sign up at familywatch.org. But I would also go to the Policy Resource Center at familywatch.org, a tab at the top, and look for our briefs on transgender issues, especially the one on suicide, because one of the things we didn't talk about, and that's the lies that they're telling in order to get transgender ideology enshrined in laws and protected. And the main one is suicide, saying children are going to commit suicide if they don't get the surgery. So that brief will take you through the bogus studies that they found actually show the opposite of what's being claimed, so that you can have the facts with regard to suicide. And then I would end with just the way they're winning the policy battles and all the hearings and the different things that they're doing is they're using the victim strategy. They're bringing in transgender identified persons and having them tell these sob stories and how they would have committed suicide and you know, how, you know, but what we need to do is take what we call is the compassionate approach. Instead of coming at this in hearings and saying, this is us against them, you know, it's our religion against theirs, it's our values against theirs. We found success in taking what we call the compassionate approach by saying, we are concerned about people who have gender dysphoria. We're concerned about those who are identifying as transgender. You know, an enemy flattereth, a friend speaketh the truth. And while we may disagree with how to help them, please let us present the facts, the medical facts that you don't hear about, that these children are going to be infertile for life. How can they possibly comprehend what that will mean? Or lose their sexual functioning, their ability to feel sexual pleasure. This is the people who are asking for this policies are the very people that we want to help be protected from this horrible, you know, thing. And we need to bring in our victims. And like I said, if you contact us, we can put you in contact with many victims who've had this horrendous surgery and who regret it, so that we can touch the hearts through these victim stories and through our compassion for the people who are confused about their agenda. These are kind of the approaches that we would suggest. So I'm glad there was just a little more time at the end that wasn't used up, because those are the main points that I really wanted to share. We've actually won debates with transgender people on the other side where we've said, we care about you. This is why we're here. We care enough to tell you something really hard to hear. You know, the first transgender surgery center in the US, the Johns Hopkins ones, shut down. Why? Because they found these surgeries weren't helping. While these people may have been, you know, excited that they had the surgery in the beginning, that didn't end. They wanted more and more surgery. It didn't solve their problems. And the suicide rates went up by 20 times, we found out from this Swedish study. So that was shut down. You know, this is what we need to help them understand, that this route, the nations are starting to look this over. Like we said, we have Finland, we have Sweden, we have the UK that are realizing this is damaging. It's damaging to the children, it's damaging to the family. And those were just my closing remarks. And we're grateful, very grateful for all of you who have joined us today, those of you who have made comments, especially you legislators, and especially for Hungary, for their willingness to come under fire from the European Union, from all sides, from inside, just for standing for this important protection for children. We're really, really grateful for the example they've set. And if we can help in any way at Family Watch International support you in policymaking to protect children, women's sports, women, even adults from this agenda, please contact us. And thank you to Lola for organizing this. And we're just grateful that for all of you for the time that you've given us, your valuable time to share with us during this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. And let me add that you have an extraordinary good seminars in your website. I took some of them about the comprehensive sexual education, United Nations, and other seminars that are in your website that are wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. So just let me finish with one question and petition that some of people are making.
Perdón, Rodrigo, la diputada Cano, Corina Cano.
Sorry, Rodrigo, the MP Cano from Panama wanted to tell
some people are making it. Do you have a very brief comment or a scheme or something that could explain in a very simple way why the 2030 agenda is not something good for children and the family and life. So if you have something that could work for that petition, and le damos la palabra a la diputada de Panamá, Corina.
And then we are going to word to Corina Cano. The word is yours. The floor is yours.
Corina, the floor is yours. Hopefully she is still online. She is still with us. Corina, go ahead. Hello. Very interesting. Thank you very much. Very interesting speeches and presentations. And indeed, we need to pay more attention to the things that we depend on, especially the legislators, the MPs. We need to be very much on the alert. Something only very briefly. At the very last general plenary of the OEA held in Lima, Peru, they also included children and women in all their diversity, and I adverted our ambassador of Panama to the OEA is that this is not a predetermined language and terminology. We need to let our ambassadors know that these representatives were not elected by the public, and they do not represent the nation. And the ambassadors, of course, are also limited due to government decrees. And it is very important that maybe people do not have the sufficient knowledge, because the webinars that we participate, well, that is not shared. And women and children in all their diversity includes transsexuality, and they also includes boys and girls. And this was also a discussion at the General Assembly of the OEA. And this is something that we should also deepen in terms of its transnationality. In Panama, the act on, well, a bill has been approved in Panama to create the Ministry of the Women. Of course, I was against, especially because of the special meaning that this gains in other countries. Transsexuality is also included, which is a privileged subject where, one more time, the right of a person is being enlarged, that this person can become a lesbian, can become transsexual. And all. So I'm making reference to what also Sharon made reference to. So MPs and legislators need to be clear about terminology. Thank God to the clarity of the terminology, and thereby I could convince the majority of the MPs not to approve this bill, and this language should be withdrawn, which the international bodies speak about. And we also need to address the ministers and the ambassadors who represent our countries, because I believe this is about a lack of knowledge, but by an unagreed terminology, they want to approve some words, some wording, which then will mean something completely different. So this was my contribution, and thank you very much to all the contribution, all the information, especially from Sharon, from your side. I believe the video affected all of us, and I believe this clarifies a lot that the fight has to go on, and we need to insist that these things do not happen in our countries. I would also like to congratulate Hungary on carrying out such extraordinary work in their public policies.
I respond really quickly.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm so glad that you're fighting, and sounds like you're going to win. You've got the passion and with the knowledge. We'd love to equip anybody who is working on these issues with a policy tool that we have that we only share with people that we trust. If you would like to email me, we have a guide that you can download on your phone to lots of terminology, even terminology that's not directly related to gender, but all the deceptive terms that are being pushed at the United Nations, what they mean, how they're using them. We also have a brief in response to Rodrigo's question on the 2030 agenda. If you go to our policy briefs section and you look up the UN 2030 agenda, and it will take you through the various deceptive terms all throughout the UN Sustainable Development Goals and how the developed countries and the UN agencies are deceptively defining those terms to advance their LGBT, abortion, sexual rights, sexuality education agenda for children. So we'd love to share that tool with you. If you want to contact me, my email is just Sharon, my name, at familywatch.org. And then we also have a video, a 7-minute video, I believe, if you go to our video section on the UN Sustainable Development Goals about how they left out the family and how the family needed to be the center of the UN Sustainable Development Goals and some of the harms within those goals. So that, sorry to take the floor so much, but there's so many tools that we have that we would just love to equip you as legislators with, that we've been, building these tools for 20 years. Also going to the War on Children or the StopCSE.org website, our documentary on the War on Children. Again, we can type into the chat, StopCSE.org. There's a Defender's Toolkit with all sorts of tools to fight the comprehensive sexuality education that pushes this agenda. And I guess I'll be quiet because there are just so many things I like to share, but I'm just appreciative for this chance to share them with you.
Thank you very much, Sharon. You have a lot of tools that we are going to use or that we are already used, but there is a lot. So thank you very much. Muchísimas gracias a todos los.
Thank you very much. Thanks to all the representatives of the more than 30 countries. To us, it's a huge pleasure. It's a huge honor having you here in this space of meeting, of training, of information exchange, because we know very well that you would like to carry out an action in favoring the family, the children, the fundamental rights. And we would also like to thank the speakers, both from Hungary and the United States, and everybody who participated. So there is nothing else left but thank everybody, and to please watch out for the next invitation to our events, and we will keep in touch. So we will keep on fighting. Thank you very much.